welcome to the show. I've got Leigh Dobbs with me today. Hello, Leigh.
Hi, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you.
Awesome. Could you tell our listening audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, as Bill said, I'm Leigh Dobbs. I am most recently the Chief Human Resource Officer for Gypsum Management Supply out of Atlanta. We're a large publicly traded company that most people didn't hear of since we had 55 different brands throughout our organization. We were acquired by SRS Distribution and the Home Depot in September. So I'm actually rolling off my current role. Um, I came up through HR through Total Rewards. So I actually have an engineering degree from Georgia Tech and an MBA from Emory. So my path to HR was a little bit different. I really liked the math and the underwriting side and the actuarial side, and then realized that I didn't necessarily want to be an actuary, but loved the Total Reward space. So I came up through that path, which is a little bit probably not the norm, and getting to that CHRO role.
That's awesome. It really must have been an advantage for you to have your engineering background.
It is a fantastic advantage because I can what the engineering program does is train you to figure out order to chaos very quickly. So how do you
Mhm.
add order into chaotic situations and get rid of data and information that's not needed to get to your, answer or your decision? So I had 5 long years of learning how to do that through my education, and it's been very helpful in my HR role.
Not that there's any chaos in HR.
No, never chaos in HR.
And order is always a good thing. I'm a systems man, and I appreciate the work that you do, and everybody who's in HR who works from a systems perspective. It's so important just to give people, um, really good entry points into working with HR
Mhm.
and maintaining the relationship because you never know when you'll need to pick up the phone.
That's exactly right.
So what else brought you into HR, and how's your perspective on it changed over time?
So HR, the perspective when I was 22 years old was more personnel, right? Because that's how, it was just where you went when you had issues with other employees or your manager. HR is so much more than that, right? HR really is the business partner to the organization, and it helps with the people development and how do we really get our resources to want to be with us. It's not about policing employees. Yes, there is conflict, but if you can resolve conflict, being very respectfully and fair, you tend to get through it very quickly. Um, so I loved the aspect of really taking care of employees and bringing, a practical mindset from that engineering background and combine that with empathy to truly drive the business forward and get employees excited to come to work every day. So that's what I love so much about HR.
And culture eats strategy for breakfast, of course.
A hundred
And
percent.
yeah, and one of the questions I often ask in my coaching practice is what gets you going every day? What gets you moving? And having an employee base that values um, their roles and wants to be there and contributing and building value is crucial.
It is very crucial. And GMS is a very special place. The culture at GMS, we evolved a lot through being founded by two owners, Dick Wickham and Dick Mueller. And then they really expanded the business across the country. And then they sold to AEA, which was private equity. And then AEA took GMS public. And we were public from 2016 to September 2025. But on all of the along that road and that pathway, the culture of the organization was just so special. People actually took care of each other, and it really was a family. And people say that, but I've never been at an organization that truly drives it and cares for one another. And that is just what is so great. So to me, as I look for my next opportunity, it is going to be all about the culture. Um, are we really doing what we say? Are we doing the right thing for not just the business, but by the employees too? Yes, there are hard decisions you make when you have to let an employee go, but if you're doing it respectfully and you're being honest and transparent, you can really get to a good spot where the employee feels respected on the way out as well.
And employees can tell,
Yes,
they they've got a great sense of what the culture is really like.
absolutely.
Uh,
And we talked about it a lot when we interviewed people, but
mhm.
when people actually, when the employees would actually start, they're like, wow, y'all talked about it a lot, but you actually really do it. Um, and that was what was the most special part about GMS.
That's such a great thing to hear when your colleagues say that.
It is.
What pulled you into learning and development as you got deeper involved in HR?
I think it's really very important to develop people. I'm a huge advocate of having coaching programs. I've
Mhm.
benefited twice in my career for by having executive coaches. I engaged with one when I got to GMS, and I can tell you that in the 3.5 years of being my first role as a publicly traded CHRO, I am a completely different person exiting. I would say my leadership capabilities, my ability to have hard conversations, really be empathetic has just, I mean, I've doubled all of that, and I feel just so grateful to have had that coaching. So to me, having career coaching is really important. It is not having a work psychiatrist. It is having a thought partner to say, how am I thinking through this? How can I really impact the organization? How do I bring people along with me? So to me, I think that career, that development of with using coaches is extremely valuable. Um, we also have a lot of management learning and development classes, but we always talked about culture within them and how do we really drive leading, not just through change, but leading inspirationally and always doing the right thing.
Yes, yes, and I'm glad to hear that you had the opportunity to have 2 coaches during your career. It's rare enough that I talk with people who've had a single coach.
Yep.
Um, can you share a recent initiative that you thought truly captured the strategic potential of HR and learning and development inside your company?
Yeah, so yes, we had a great leadership program. So when I joined, it was as my, the CHRO role, that was a space, the learning development that I had not completely conquered. So I knew about it, but I didn't understand how do we really get this driven throughout the organization, and get leaders, business leaders, to see an ROI, right? Because there's it's really hard to prove a return on that investment. If we're going to spend $15,000 for a person to go to a 4 day leadership conference or leadership meeting, and we had internal programs that were fantastic, but how what is that return on the value to them? So I think that's really getting the buy-in from the leaders is what is so important. And we were able to show the return on value through increased productivity, through the ability to get through conflict more quickly, where it doesn't drag you down to where you're not actually doing your job. So the initiative we had, it was called Ignite, the Ignite program, and it was really cute because we also had Fuel, and then we had Spark. So Spark was for our entry level supervisory you know, team members. And then Ignite was really through the manager level and just helping them. We even dug into how do you recruit, go slow to hire. Um, because the hiring is the number one thing that I think companies don't do well, right? You got to hire a great person. If you don't hire the right, then it's just going to cause issues. It's going to erode your culture. It's going to cause team member issues. And then the best team members are going to leave because they can go find new jobs. And then we had Fuel, and Fuel was a program that the senior most leaders that we had in our succession planning would meet with the board. They met with the executive team and did capstone projects, but it really showed them how to take, their individual kind of brand and company that they came up through and understand how it relates to GMS overall.
Awesome. Um, and I love the Spark Ignite Fuel.
And that
Or
kid's so great. Yes.
yeah, that it worked out really, really well.
Yeah.
Um, it we often think about what learning programs can and should do, as you just mentioned. What are some of the biggest gaps or underdeveloped areas in learning programs, and how do you identify and address those?
So I think one of the biggest gaps is the self-learning. So because, people are not, I mean, yes, you're motivated to learn, but to find that time and that balance of doing your job, having your family, or your personal life, and then taking time to do that self-development. Um, so, I don't think anybody's truly cracked this code because people, you can't force somebody to be a self-developer. They have to have that drive to want it. So I think that's the biggest gap and challenge that HR leaders have is how do we get employees to take control of their own learning?
Mhm,
Because yes, we can add the programs and have them come, and that's great. But if they're not truly trying to build upon their skills, y- you can't force them to do that. And I think that's the biggest gap we have of just getting employees to engage, helping them find the time to do it, making sure they know what resources they have. Um, and then if they do the programs, what does that mean? Right. So if you just take, let's say you're a financial analyst and you need to get better at Excel and you take Excel classes and you're very excited, you've gotten better at Excel. Do you get promoted then? Like, what's the next step? Right. So I think also having employees understand that when they develop the skills, it doesn't necessarily mean you get more responsibility or increase in pay, but it's more for you to be more talented at your current job to set yourself up to being recognized. But it doesn't give an immediate return to the employee either. So I think there's that disconnect that happens when people or our team members go through the self learning.
and that's a great point about the disconnect. Um, one of the things that I often hear is, younger generations want results now. They wanna see that the corporate learning is relevant and
Mhm.
exciting for them, and it sounds like you found a formula that works.
Well, it's still a work in progress, right? But it definitely, employees are definitely taking the chance to do the courses. But we also need to help them correlate how that's going to impact their career. So we've worked very hard on career pathing of what skills you need to be at a director level or a VP level. Like, what does that mean? And it's not just, financial acumen or knowing your job really well. It's how do you bring others along? How do you interact? How are you a culture carrier? So there's so much that goes into that of the learning and that development of yourself to set yourself up to be promoted or move to the next role that you're going after. And I think sometimes that ecosystem is is not fully understood. And I don't think HR leaders, we do a fantastic job of showing how it works, right? Because there's so many moving pieces to it.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think that's the biggest one. And then just really proving that return on investment. A lot of
Yeah.
times it's cost avoidance, right? Like you're
Mhm.
reducing turnover because you're giving employees ability to grow within your organization. It's a cost avoidance because they're not disgruntled and causing issues or not being productive. They're actually engaged. So the HR ROI or cost avoidance is extremely hard to prove. CFOs don't typically like cost avoidance, right? So because
Right.
it's not a hard number. Um, so it's just one of those things where you have to continuously talk about it and try and show as many metrics and through succession planning, promotions, and how people really moved along in their career to show examples to other employees of what it means to be part of that ecosystem and work it in the right way.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point about the hidden metrics, the hidden numbers that help drive learning and development forward. You know, it I've met so many executives who assume that if they don't hear anything, there must not be any problems.
Right. Yes.
And yeah, and sometimes there are problems and you hear about them too late.
Mhm.
Um,
That's exactly right. So it help and also it helps, we did at a previous company, we did the Crucial series, which is crucial accountability, crucial conversations, crucial accountability, and then crucial influencer.
hmm,
And I love that series as well. So that's available that you could hire someone to come in and teach that at different organizations. But we all started talking the same language. And this again is the previous organization, but it really helped understand how do you influence others when you can't hold them accountable, right? Because there's maybe not a reporting chain. Um, or how do you influence when you're responsible but don't have authority? So it's really making the employee very well rounded into all aspects of their own engagement and the engagement with others.
Yes, yes. Engagement's key, and it's like culture. People can sense when their colleagues are disengaged or less than interested or just distracted by the firefighting and the other day to day and minute to minute duties that they've got.
Absolutely. I'll say one of our other biggest wins is we had quite a few senior leaders retire,
Hmm.
and I don't believe we went outside to hire for one replacement because we developed our talent within the organization, and so we were able to capitalize upon our succession plans, and so then other employees see that leaders are being promoted into roles versus us bringing in outside talent. And that again had to do with just making sure they were developed and ready to go when that SVP role came open.
Hmm. Speaking of leadership, what are the most important leadership capabilities to build right now, and how can HR and learning and development support that?
I think authenticity is one of the leadership qualities that people miss. And I don't believe you can teach authenticity. So it's just making sure you're helping the communication and being as transparent as you can be, right? You can't be transparent about everything when you're in that leadership role. Um, and also how to have that EQ.
Hmm.
I personally had to work very hard on my EQ, my emotional intelligence, and how to have empathy when I really saw black and white matter, right?
Hmm.
And I think almost role playing at times. So some of the development courses we have includes role playing. I cannot stand role playing. I do not like it, but I do think it's very valuable. Um, in developing some of those more soft skills. So I think there's a lot of soft skills that are missed when it comes to leadership capabilities. Having integrity, being transparent, being authentic, bringing your full self to work, saying what you mean, um, you know, not promising things you can't do. I think all of those soft skills are what we really have to focus on when we're getting people ready for leadership because there's so many times where you have an individual contributor who's fantastic at their job and you're like, oh, well, let's just promote them. But they don't have any of those soft skills to truly engage their team and lead their team. And so then it all falls apart, right? Because then people don't want to work for them or they do all the work themselves because they're not used to moving from being a full-on contributor to how do you delegate? And how do you delegate and not worry that you're not the one churning out the work anymore, per se. You're not the reviewer and you're the one who is making, moving obstacles out of the way. It's a little scary. I remember when I went from a director level to a VP role, that was probably my hardest jump because I no longer did all the work. I then had to direct the work, advise on the work. If an employee would come to me and do it differently than I would have done it, but it's still good. Do I even give my opinion? Right. So things like that, you just have to learn and hopefully pass down as you're developing other leaders.
Hmm. That's that's a really good point, and there's so many mentoring opportunities that come about in leadership development, and I've always thought that is a hallmark of what a, a good leadership development program can do is
Mhm.
that peer support.
Is peer support. And I would say another one is being flexible, right? Just being really flexible. Like if you try something and it doesn't work, then pivot quickly. Being agile, say, you know what, I was wrong. Let's figure it out. Let's go make it right. I think um, knowing when you do need to pivot or when you tried something that didn't work, I think that's really important in a leader. And some leaders do that much better than others.
Yeah, eating humble pie can be a tough thing to do,
Yes.
and
But if you're successful, you've eaten a lot of it, I promise.
yes, yes, it's a fine diet. You know, something I've learned in my career is that it's important to um, admit to being wrong when it comes
Mhm.
up and do your best to continually improve from that point.
I 100% agree with that statement. And the folks who can admit it quickly and admit it to their entire team will be way more successful than those that try and pivot without admitting that what happened didn't work or what was tried didn't work.
And EQ does play a big role in that too.
It does. It plays a very big role because you again, it's all about bringing your teams along and making sure they understand the why and, like, "Hey, you put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this direction I gave you, and it didn't work, but it's not because you're not capable and you don't have the ability to do it. It's just because we chose the wrong path. So, let's pivot and let's be positive and move to this other path and see what happens," right? And if you approach it that way with that empathy because employees will work very, very hard. Um, and they also don't like to fail. It's also hard for them if
Mhm.
they fail. So I think there needs to be a lot of support. And really the leader should own that failure, not the employees. And then the employees get to own the success, not the leader, is how I try and approach things.
That's a really healthy perspective to hear. Um, you know, I grew up in a generation that, would squarely put failure on the person who led the project, and it's go back to EQ, it's not emotionally healthy, and it erodes both trust and continuous improvement. We
And
see.
if you approach trust, it's over, right? If you don't have trust among the teams, then you're not going to be the team that's going to be successful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
it's a big one. Um,
It's funny, when people ask me, like, "How do you get feedback? How do I go about getting feedback and doing things?" And I say, "Only ask the people that you trust." However, you gotta be able to trust people that are gonna be hard on you as well,
mhm,
right? Because the best feedback you'll get is from a thought partner or someone that you really trust, but will be very honest with you, right? And then that's how you really push the accelerator on your own development and growth, because then you start learning how to do things a little bit differently. I remember asking, this is a couple jobs ago, I'd presented to the CEO and I asked the CFO how I did, and he said, "You did terrible. You bombed it." And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, let's peel that back," right? But then as he peeled it back, what I realized is although I was getting my point across, I wasn't doing it in a succinct way and bites in the way that the CEO liked to receive information. And so then what I needed to do and pivot is learn how others like to receive information and start working that way in order to bring them along. But had he not given me that honest feedback, I never would have been successful in the role because I wouldn't have known how to communicate successfully with the CEO.
great point, great point. Um, and especially at the C level and the VP ranks, being able to have those kinds of conversations with the the CEO is important
Mhm.
and can really make or break that level of trust.
Absolutely. And if it breaks the trust, it's very hard to get back.
It
It's like
is.
a reputation. You work your entire life to have a good one, and it only takes a couple of minutes to destroy it. And that's the same thing with trust and integrity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um,
Oh.
well, let's turn our focus to learning specifically for a moment. Um, we're always worried about how we make learning accessible, engaging, and relevant across the organization with all its levels and locations. How do you do that?
That is always a challenge, I think, for HR. I think what you do is have to get the buy-in from the leaders first. I also say that you hit the road. You get out there and you develop the relationships with the leaders. You show them what the training can do. You take the leaders through the training first, so they can see where it's valuable, get the feedback from them. And once you have the buy-in from the leadership in the organization, they will start making sure their employees know what's available to them. So it can't just be an HR push out. Because think about it, if you get an email from HR that you need to go do this training, people roll their eyes. They're not excited about it. Why do I need to do compliance training or whatever, yada, yada training? So it really has to be kind of that grassroots where you develop something, the leaders are able to say, this is great, or can you add this, or take this out, um, and get everybody on that same page. And then you start that deployment. And that's what happened when I have this wonderful colleague, Tony Dasher. I hope she doesn't mind I said her name, but she's the VP of talent at GMS. And she was able to do that. People wanted Ignite. So we had, 8 sessions every year and it was full to the brim. And she put over 500 managers in that program. And it was intimate, intimate setting. They were not basically allowed to do any work. They had to be fully focused in Ignite. But then all of a sudden word of mouth hit and people were begging to go to it,
Mhm.
and they loved it. So that's really, and this because we got she did and I will not take credit for it because she did it. She got a fantastic uh, alliance through taking the leaders and pivoting on what they needed. The other thing that I would say was really special is that she would have an ELT member come in and kick it off, right? So I never loved kicking them off because I just don't like to stand up in front of people and tell them what they should be doing. But when you get your CEO or your COO up there saying, we're really excited you're here, you're going to learn a lot from this, soak up every ounce, it goes a really long way.
It does, it does. It builds excitement, it builds engagement, and it directly shows people that, the top ranks of the organization believe the program's relevant and
Hmm.
helpful.
Absolutely. And then that's how Spark was born, right? So Spark was how do we get this development program further into the organization, but we don't necessarily need the recruiting aspect of it, or we don't need X aspect of it. So then she was able to work and develop, a more lower level, but still start getting that language being used, kind of like how our culture works and the language we use within our culture embedded deeper into the organization.
Mhm. Let's say you had the opportunity to recreate and redesign HR and corporate learning function from ground zero. What would you do differently than what we do now?
I would start with the learning and development versus the business.
Really?
Um, well, what I mean is when you create a business, had we know, like, GMS is 75 years old or 55 years old, but had it happened from the beginning, then it would just be so ingrained, right? So it's really hard when you're running a business and then you try to add the L&D side in it. So I would say as quickly as you can get the programs up and running and do somewhat part of the onboarding to really ingrain it into all new employees that this is something that is extremely important. We really want you to be, engaged in it, but get it up front as they're coming in the door, right? If you get people in the door and they are with their peers and their other peers are not doing L&D, or doing that the self monitored development, it's hard to then get them engaged in it. So to me, I think starting with the onboarding piece about how important it is where you get the success. And from being, we have a lot of safety programs at GMS, and
Mhm.
we do a lot of the safety training up front. So the safety is 100% ingrained immediately with our employees. So we lead with safety, and I would say that we have our head of risk and safety put in a premier uh, program. And so employees are always hearing about safety first. And that's so ingrained in the culture. And he was able to get it on day one, where people are having to go through all of our safety. Now it's very hard on day two to go through learning development. This is what we want to do. What is your career path? Because, the operators want to get them to work.
Mhm.
And it's more of an afterthought. So if there was a way to get it there was a way to add more hours to the day for L&D, that's what I would
Mhm.
do, which there isn't. But I think just really getting it ingrained in the culture as much as you can and talking about it is, really important. I don't know what I would do differently from scratch. I'm not sure what I would do totally different. I think just, again, getting it as part of the language and the culture, and people feel, you know, that it's really helping them in their role and helping them grow their career, and then talking about those stories and sharing those stories out within the organization, I think is a really good thing.
Oh, wow. That's a great point about communication, and,
Yeah.
storytelling is that's just such a big part of human existence.
It is. If you can say, I started at GMS. I mean, we do have someone who started on a forklift and now runs a huge division, right? And that is such a great story. Um, and just talking about like how that person developed themselves and really got ingrained and learned the business and learned the leadership. And actually, this individual I'm talking about is one of our biggest proponents of learning and development programs across the organization because he saw how it helped him. And so he gets that story out very well,
Wow.
very
Um,
nicely.
it's great to have, heroes like that in the organization who not only understand the ins and outs of the job, they have gone through that development and leadership journey.
Hmm. They're the biggest advocates, right? Because then they share their journey and people see how, if you invest in yourself, how you can be successful. And I think that's a wonderful message.
Mhm. Any
Yep.
closing thoughts for our audience, Lee?
I think in closing, HR is a very special group. Um, and if it is used the right way, if HR can be ingrained in the business and ingrain that L&D and ingrain some of the wonderful things that I believe HR professionals bring, it really makes the business better. Because we always talk in business about how our human resources are the most important, our people are most important. But so many times that's a tagline, and businesses do not treat the people as most important. So I think if you can find a leader who truly pushes that forward, that is going to be a great place to be. And I think the HR executives that I know are starting to really move in that direction. And so I think it's going to be a very exciting time to be part of HR and be part of the L&D.
It is, it is. Well, many thanks to you, Lee, for sharing your thoughts today, and, as always, leave your comments, out there in listener land if you've got any questions, and, we'll take another step with you soon on the perfect route.
Thank you, Bill.